Brad, thank you so much for joining us on the Modern Soccer Coach webinar. Really excited to have you on.
Yeah, my pleasure for being on. Thanks for having me, and I hope everyone on the call and yourself have gotten through these crazy times. Okay, been interesting to say the least.
To kick it off, one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was 310 consecutive Premier League starts is unbelievable, an unbelievable record. Whenever you were at Liverpool, and that was the generation. I was back in the UK and watching football at that time, and it was not an inconsistent Liverpool team, but a team that was kind of up and down in terms of challenging for titles. A tough team to break into. How difficult was it to get that consistency early in your career in the Premier League?
Yeah, it was. When I look back at my whole career, I mean, even going back to youth sides and UCLA, the most inconsistent I ever played was my first sort of 3 months at Liverpool. And I'm not a nervous type of character when it came to playing in front of crowds or with big clubs. I played at many big clubs throughout my career, and it had nothing to do with the competition with David James at the time. I thrived on competition with everyone. I've looked back and tried to put my finger on it, and I just can't. There's nothing. There's no rhyme or reason for it. I think it was just that's the way the soccer gods or the football gods put it into place. And so, first impressions are key to everything. And then by the time I did get some consistency going, the club was in a big transition, and we first went into co-managers, which I think was one of the first and maybe last, or one of the few times ever in the history of English football where we had Roy Evans and Gerard Houllier. And there was a definite split in the camp between Roy Evans signings and Gerard Houllier signings, not from the player standpoint, but from the staff and who was being chosen to play and the board and who they wanted at the club and who they didn't want at the club. And I think when Arsene Wenger brought in the amount of professionalism he did into Arsenal, with the amount of players abroad, and not the fact that they were foreign, just the fact of how fit they were and big they were and strong they were. And it soon became a different game where you couldn't have a training session and go to the pub. Football transformed during those times where the bigger, the stronger, the faster, the more fit, the better nutrition, all those elements were coming into it. And that's what Gerard Houllier brought into Liverpool. And I think by the time Gerard really respected myself, because I wasn't one of his signings, he had already purchased Sander Westerveld. They put in a lot of money into Sander, and two goalkeepers couldn't play, so I needed to go. But it was not a move that I wanted to make, that's for sure. I don't think there's many players in the world that ever want to leave Liverpool. It's a magnificent club, but I also needed to leave to play. So. It was a strange one. The inconsistency, just for that first 3 months. I really don't know what to put it down to. But what a magnificent club to be a part of.
When you look at Anfield and again growing up, you hear about the Kop and how much of an advantage the Kop is for the home team to drive them through it in the last 15-20 minutes. Does that become a burden at the other end then if you're a goalkeeper standing in front of that?
It can be. Like when I went and played there with the other teams, with opposing teams, I always got a standing ovation, and they were very, very, very good to me. I think one of the best things about English football in general, but then you could take it down to there's a select few clubs, Liverpool being one of them, where the fans are so incredibly educated on the game. They really are, and even take Manchester United out of it, and take maybe Everton out of it, but even then. They might applaud really good play by the opposition. I don't think they'll ever applaud Manchester United. Don't get me wrong, but there's still the football purist in there that could appreciate how good even a Ryan Giggs was in his day. It's a magnificent place to play. So when ex-players that they knew never disrespected the club and gave their all for the club, even if they weren't successful. At the club by means of winning trophies and things of that nature, they would give him a tremendous reception because they really appreciated people that wanted to play for the shirt, that supported the club growing up, that really wanted to do well, and they could appreciate really good football. So when I went and played there, I never felt as a player under pressure from the actual cup. You feel pressure because Liverpool, you're supposed to win every game. You have to win every game, and then you get scrutinized by the press. That's a different type of pressure. It's not by your own fans. And most certainly as an away, when I played with Blackburn, when I played with Villa, when I played with Tottenham, going there, always a really special occasion, and no further pressure put on me. As a matter of fact, it was the opposite. They were very, very welcoming when I came back.
Let's go back then to the Evans and Houllier, that combination. I mean, again, on paper, it looks an absolute recipe for disaster. I mean, apart from take team selection out of the way, how did it operate on a daily basis?
It was tough. I think really looking back on it, and this is not a to slight your Rick Perry's and Peter Robinsons at the time when they were making decisions. I genuinely think that they wanted to try to find a place for Roy Evans in the club long term because of how long he had been at the club. I mean, I think it was 35 years at the time that he left, something of that nature. And Roy was a really, really nice human being and loved Liverpool. I mean, he was in tears when he was leaving, when he was talking to all the players, and real, genuine tears. And the players, especially the Liverpudlian players that were there, really felt awful for Roy when he was leaving that day. But I also think that they knew a change needed to be made with regards to the running of the club, because no longer could Liverpool run just on the name Liverpool. They had to be able to cash in, so to speak, on their notoriety globally, which they weren't doing. They had all this global recognition and global following, but they weren't turning a lot of that into dollars at the time. And Manchester United was, and there was a big discrepancy in the monies coming in from a Man United and Liverpool at the time, just as the Premier League was starting to take off with money, and Liverpool knew that, and Mr. Moores, another Liverpool supporter who owned the club at the time, was such a good guy. It really was, and he wanted nothing but the best for Liverpool. But I think he also needed to get someone in there that could expand the club globally, because it just turned into that type of monster. The Premier League turned into that type of monster. And I think they just got stuck into really wanting to do right by Roy, but also bringing in a manager who could make changes, and that's what Gerard was very, very good at. Gerard, very good coach, but probably, a better technical director, so to speak, because he knew, he helped with the infrastructure of the training ground, helped with the infrastructure of the, on the physical elements of the game, the hires, the players that came in, and really transformed the club. And it was tough to catch up to Arsenal and Manchester United at the time. I mean, now look where they are today. They are flying, and they're at the top of the tree. And a lot of that comes back to the change that Gerard was making. And Jurgen Klopp's outstanding, and what he has done, without a doubt. But the whole infrastructure had to change. I think I just think that they got stuck in between really wanting to look after Roy, and they made a mistake by doing it, because it was tough. You didn't know as a player who to go speak to. Do you knock on Roy's door? Do you knock on Gerard's? Do you go into both of them? It might be really uncomfortable to speak to both of them as well, because I was signed by Roy, and I felt a little uncomfortable going in and speaking to Gerard. But I don't think at the time Roy had any of the power to make a sole decision, and I'm not sure if Gerard did either. And it was a little bit confusing, but and it's a shame, because both men, both coaches, all they wanted to do was win. Not one coach wanted to go out and put that team out to lose. And and I'll just reiterate, I just think they were trying to do right by Roy, and they probably did it in a way that didn't work. But it was that's water under the bridge now, and Liverpool atop of the tree at the moment.
When you mentioned there about Wenger and how the Premier League changed with obviously the culture, the drinking culture, then became a professionalism, and it looked like how Wenger done it was bringing in a lot of players, and Houllier probably. And I listened to Carragher's podcast with Michael Owen a couple of months ago, and they were so big on it. How did he change to get the discipline, the professionalism, without actually bringing in 20 international players? How did you do it with the homegrowns?
Well, he chose certain homegrowns to keep, and it didn't hurt that the homegrowns that he had to choose from had a young Michael Owen in it, had a young Steven Gerrard in it. Those are two of the best footballers that have ever stepped foot on a field, and they still had in the catchment area at the academy. They still had incredible amounts of talent that wanted to come into the academy. And Gerard, he was ruthless, and he had to be ruthless with the drinkers at the club. It was once he knew that you were out. And I'm not saying you couldn't have live a life under Gerard. Of course you could live a life, but the true old English drinking culture, that was done. Yeah, and rightly so. It was getting too difficult. Sir Alex Ferguson had to change, and he openly states it because of what Arsene Wenger was doing, and they did, and those two clubs changed quicker than Liverpool did, and that's why Liverpool got left behind for a few years. And if you just see the fitness elements that Klopp has brought in, them Man City are at the top when it comes to that at the moment, and Mauricio Pochettino wasn't too far behind in that. The game, the players are too athletic nowadays. They're just too strong and too fast. And Jamie Carragher was another example. I mean, he really enjoyed himself off the field when he was young, and I don't know. I'm not privy to the private conversations. Maybe I'm sure Carrie's quite open when he talks on in the media and podcasts, and when he work, when he's doing his job now, he I, I'm sure there were a couple of harsh words behind closed doors with Gerard and Jamie. I don't know if he said so. I'm sure there was, because there was a tipping point with him. Whether do I discard Jamie Carragher or do I keep him? But he was too good of a player to discard. So Gerard worked with him, and he kept him there. And then Kara had an incredible career. I mean, to play as many games as he did for Liverpool, and he was one of those players that when he was young he could play in 5 or 6 different positions. So he could slot into different places, and there were injuries and suspensions, and because he worked so hard all the time, he have a spot. But I'm sure, and I haven't spoken to Kara in quite some time, but I'm sure he would attribute a lot of his success to Gerard. I would assume.
Yeah, he said he was the best manager he'd played for,
Yeah,
which
there,
is.
there you go. Yeah.
Um, then with the goalkeeper position changing along with this whole cultural revolution, I mean, at what stage of your career did you see the the work with the feet, the pass and the range? At what stage did you start to think I need to start changing how I train? Was it a coach that put you through it, or was it yourself? And how did that work?
A little bit of both, but the biggest change, if you go back, or you ever watch old videos and clips of the 2002 World Cup, that when that World Cup started, there were goalkeepers started doing a lot of different things with the feet, and started becoming an 11th player when building out of the back. I know there were a couple goalkeepers. You go back to '98 with Fabian Barthez was quite flamboyant with his feet, and you had Higuita, Colombia, and you had Jorge Campos with Mexico, who would do a few little things of flair, and you had Chilavert, who would come up and take free kicks for Paraguay and things of that nature. But by and large, it was still, up until that point, it was pretty standardized. The ball would come back, and especially in English football, because the amount of times you got closed down as a goalkeeper is different than any of the other leagues. I'll comment on that on an aside. I think a lot of people will watch Italian football or Spanish football, Dutch football, German football, and say, look at the goalkeepers continuously pass the ball out of the back. Well, one thing that doesn't happen in those leagues is you're not encouraged all the time to press the goalkeeper when he has the ball. And in English football, whether you're playing top of the league or bottom of the league, you're getting pressed a lot. as a goalkeeper. The ball goes back, they'll shoot someone to press at you. So a lot of times you can't play out of the back because of the high pressing nature of the games. But I would think a lot of the goalkeepers in that 2002 World Cup, that's when I started noticing, percentage wise, 70, 80, 90% of the goalkeepers were really accurate on finding passes out of the back, even long range passes. The side volley, as to start the attacks, out of the hands as well. But I would say, and I don't have the stats in front of me, but if you went from the '98 World Cup up to the 2002 World Cup, and then you looked at the leagues around the world from 2002 probably to 2006, I would say the percentage that goalkeepers were completing passes rose dramatically.
Mm. And then alongside that, you mentioned there before about, obviously we talked about the pints. You mentioned UCLA. I mean, there's a good time to be had at UCLA as well. So I'm sure there wasn't a complete culture shock. I mean, to get your career to a stage of 40 and beyond, like I'm 39, it's hard to go for a run some mornings. So I mean, was that a switch to your lifestyle, or was this just always the way you've lived your life?
Yeah, I was never. I mean, listen, I enjoyed myself. Don't get me wrong, especially college days and earlier. But I wasn't a consistent drinker. I didn't abuse my body. I was always that I wasn't. I got to a point probably 26, 27, 28 years of age in my life where I really shut down the drinking to minimal times per year. And I played at very low body fats. When I had torn a couple of muscles. I think it when I was 31 years of age, and then I took up yoga. And from that point on, I knock on wood, I hardly had an injury the rest of my career, and I really looked after myself. And one of the reasons that I kept carrying on and playing is I would speak to my coaches, and my contracts were coming up, and they would just ask me and say, "How do you feel?" And I said, "How do I look?" And they said, "You look the same." And I was like, "Okay, then I'll sign again." Because they're watching me day to day. I'm trying and trying and trying and trying, and if all of a sudden something just looks a little bit off, then I wanted them to tell me, because the money was too big for a club to pay. If they were just doing it to, because they think they have an experienced goalkeeper. I didn't want to just be an experienced goalkeeper. I wanted to be able to play. And then my last two seasons at Tottenham, so 43, 44, I did all the training, without a doubt, but I was also heavily focused on the coaching in the academy and with the first team. But I was still completely fit. And when I was retiring, Mauricio said, he goes, "You don't have to. I'll take you for another year, because you're not falling off." And I said, "Well, but my love of waking up every morning and doing this is is drastically decreasing." So and then once it got to that point, that mentally, that I needed to call it a day. But physically, I could have carried on for another season or two, and that was even training and playing with with Premier League players, and Tottenham was one of the best at the time. When I came back and started coaching in the U.S., especially when I was at New England, just the whole pace was different. Because I still had my eye from the Premier League. It wasn't that many years before, so it was, I felt when I was standing out there, I felt, wow, I could still play here.
Well, on Pochettino and Spurs, you said he was a massive influence on going into coaching. I mean, how was that environment that he created at Tottenham?
He's one of the best out there. He really is. It's not easy navigating through what's above you at Tottenham. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Mr. Levy is a very, very hard negotiator. And he's very set in his ways on how he runs a club. And I was there 4 years, four managers. I mean, that should tell a tale. And then Mauricio was there for 5.5 years, something of that nature. How he was fired, I was very surprised at how he was fired. But he to get the club and the players that he had into those positions consistently year in and year out. It's remarkable when you're there. It'll be tough. As good as Jose Mourinho is, tough for anybody to consistently, top 4 places and battling for top spot a couple times and getting into Champions League finals. It's not easy when you have the budget that you're given at Spurs, and the Mauricio was able to get every bit of percentage out of his players on the field, and and it's exhausting. It really is. It's his regime, very much like Klopp. From what I understand, I've never obviously been around Jurgen Klopp, but from some friends that I have, very demanding. The fitness levels that you have to reach are astronomical, and then on top of that, you obviously have to have the flair and the skill, and to be able to win at the top level. And it's tough. I understand, possibly a shelf life, for certain players on certain years when you're playing with coaches like that because of the demands, and not sure everyone's bodies can go through it. But what Mauricio was outstanding at was figuring out which bodies could go through it and keeping those players, and then getting rid of the ones that couldn't. And some of the players, and the staff members that he has with him are very, very good, and he counts on them, and respects them, and really values their opinions. So when they all go to their next club, it's going to be successful again. If he is ever fortunate enough to get himself into one of the real big clubs with one of the real big budgets, and
I would imagine it's pretty exhausting as well. But for a coach, like, to go in every day, and because he seems to be very relationship based, but he also seems to be very intense. So offsetting that on a daily basis and the emotional intelligence around that would not be easy.
No, not easy at all. But he's a very intelligent man. There's no other way to put it. His training sessions are mentally exhausting and physically exhausting. And some of his best work was off the field, to make sure the players, and then he knew the players that were going to win and lose them games. Some of his best work was done when training was over, and making sure those players were ready to come back the next day and do it all over again. Because it's tough. It really is. And when you're, especially for the players that I would say 26 and old, maybe between 26 and 30, that were set in their ways and with different coaches over the years, and maybe even guys who started their careers having Wednesdays off, having 2-3 days off after games off, but they're not guaranteed days off. And the days off are solely for resting the body, not for entertainment, to be able to fly away to go see your family. So it was something that I had to wrap my head around, and I didn't. Probably one of the reasons I got fired. But I just couldn't get my head around it. Like I could not understand how you could be so. And this wasn't everyone, by the way. We had some wonderful players and people at New England, but I could not understand the ones that just wouldn't want to be fit all year round. I could not get, because I couldn't understand. Long gone were the days where you could turn up to preseason 25 pounds overweight. If that happened with Mauricio, or that happened with Gerard Houllier, you would never ever see the field. Here you get protected by the CBA. Yeah. It's amazing. And people talk about the pressures, and I got lambasted by the media with comments after one of our matches. And it was. It's all about professionalism for me. It really was. I just could not get my head around it. And that is where the pressure comes in. You knew over there you had to be fit or you're out. You knew over there you had to win or you're out. You knew, and that's where, and things will get there in this country. We have some, we've made some enormous strides, but I just couldn't, I couldn't understand someone coming in over 20 pounds overweight and me having to include them in first team training. I didn't understand that, but that's for a different topic.
But there's plenty of college coaches who would say the same thing. I mean, I was a college coach, and now with and we'll talk about college towards the end of this with the college fit finder. Like, now when players sign their scholarships, it's borderline impossible for them to lose their scholarships. So is it an MLS thing, or is it a cultural thing in the US, do you think?
I think it's a cultural thing from, you're going to see me walking around for a minute because I have to get my charger. Sorry.
No worries, no
Um,
worries.
you're, I think it's a cultural thing with regards to how some players are protected within NFL, Major League Baseball, and NBA. But those sports are not on a year-round basis. And also in soccer, we're developed at a much younger age, and you need to get into the system at a much younger age to be able to then get developed to your full potential. And so I think there is some of that that goes around. But when I'm going back to UCLA days, we were incredibly fit. The Mike Lappers and Joe Max Moores and Chris Hendersons, and so culture maybe, but I also think it's a little bit of an easy way out, and you get protected by people who have never played.
Yeah, yeah. Because part of that has got to be a major motivator as well, to know that the exit door is you're on the verge of it at all times. So you gotta, like, that's where high performance, surely there's so much to gain from that rather than the negatives with it.
Yeah, and what I was told, and coming back and being hired, that they wanted to change the way that things were by people that were at the bigger clubs around the world. But then when it came down to it, there were only certain people that wanted to hear it, and it was definitely not the people that were protecting players. So, like, if you go to Gordon Taylor in the PFA, and one of the players is 27 pounds overweight for preseason, Gordon Taylor, who used to play, is going to say, well, listen, I don't know how you want me to help you. Like, do you have a medical condition or something of that nature? And if it's no medical condition, he's going to say, well, I'm sorry, but there are some rules in place, but those rules are there has to be a first team coach present, and there has to be at least 3 other pros. But you do not have to train with the first team because you're not fit. And in MLS, you have the contracts that you're supposed to maintain your fitness, but they don't get adhered to.
Crazy.
So it's an interesting one.
Yeah. Last couple here, and then I'll open it up for we've got a couple of good ones from the crowd that are better than my questions, so I'm gonna bring theirs in.
All right.
You played with so many managers, and I would imagine something I'm fascinated about is who can, at that level, that daily interaction, who can impact on match day the best. I mean, in your experience in that hour or two before kickoff or even half time, who stood out for you?
Wow, I get asked this a lot, and I think people think this is a cop out by me. No, they do, because they're and so many different managers. I mean, Graham Souness was unbelievable for my career. And I think he's probably like chalk and cheese. Some people loved him, some people hated him. He was incredible for me. Mark Hughes, really big influence on my career. Mauricio on my coaching career. But I also was able to learn from the likes of Roy Evans and Gerard at the time, who were on 2 different stratospheres with how they ran a club. They really were. Like Roy, let's go have a week training away in Marbella. And Gerard was, let's go for a week, of training, but at a thalassotherapy place, we can 3 times a day. It's completely but both won trophies in their career. Both, are good people. Both are good head coaches. But it's now Martin O'Neill, incredible to learn from. Then I had Gerard again at Villa, so I had him twice. And to see how then he manifested it later, and the changes that he made, and because we all learn every single day. And so he was a little bit different. Unfortunately, he got sick when he was at Villa the second time round. And then it was a whirlwind when I went down to Tottenham, because at first I had Harry Redknapp, who was completely different to Andre Villas-Boas, who was completely different to Tim Sherwood, who was completely different to Mauricio Pochettino. So you talk, who is the best match day motivator? Martin O'Neill was up there in a very quiet kind of way, though. He used to come in, an hour and a bit before a game and read off a small piece of paper the team. That's when you found out who was playing. You did not know through the entire week. Didn't know who was on the subs bench, didn't know who was included, didn't know anything. 18 to 20 people or 19, 20 people would turn up in the changing room in your suits in an hour and 5 minutes or something like that before kickoff. He would name the team. But when he was upset at halftime or right before a game and you knew, and you did not want to upset him. And that was a strategy of his. And look at his career. He's had a very successful managerial career. I think someone like Mark Hughes was more calculated in his approach. Mauricio was definitely calculated, and then Graham Souness ran by as a very diplomatic, very, very good to the players that he liked and respected, and would do anything for you. But boy, if he didn't like you, he would let you know. And he found people that he didn't like found very difficult playing for him. So for me, I was motivated by all of them. And then I'm leaving one out at Galatasaray, Fatih Terim. He was outstanding, because the things that he had to go through still goes through now, because he's still with Galatasaray. But the different factions of the media out in Turkey are unlike no place I've ever been before, and it's really, really hard to get that right. On top of that, you have certain religious factions there that you have to deal with all the players, because not all players are going to have the same faith base that everybody else has, and he had to be able to pull every person together to play as a team, and he still does that today. And he's very, very good at doing that. And on match day, nothing else matters. We're going to go out and play. He was excellent at that.
As data and analysis started creeping in over the quite recently and gone mainstream, I mean, as an experienced goalkeeper in your last couple of years, what were you looking for your goalkeeper coach in the lead up to a game?
I mean, when I got older, I wasn't really looking at anything. I knew the goalkeeping coaches that I had were all professional. Again, like I didn't have a goalkeeping coach that I didn't like. Especially as a fella, the goalkeeping coaches that you get, especially over in the Premier League, most all of them have played at a really high level, and they understand what players need. They understand what how to manage. Hold on one second. I got an angry boy right here. I'm on a webinar right now, buddy, and I'm gonna be done in probably about 20 or 30 minutes. And then, 30 minutes. Okay, then after that, then we'll go out. I can't. Okay. There we go. This is quarantine life.
We're all there. I feel your pain.
Yeah. So, So the goal. By the time I was older, I could live myself through the week. When I was younger, it depended probably on how the previous game was and how hard, and I worked a lot harder closer to a game when I was younger. When I got older, the Thursday, Fridays became maintenance days. Still trained every day, but when I was younger, the Thursdays were still light days. That's mainly how it worked throughout my career. But the Fridays, I would blast away even playing on the Saturday just for a shorter amount of time. And then as I got older, the goalkeeping coaches a lot of times will come to me and say, this is what I would like to do the day before the game. How do you see it? And then we would work it out like that. But I also had the luxury. Every goalkeeper coach I had, they knew I worked really hard, so it wasn't as if I was ever trying to get out of work.
Something I just watched the Gary Neville soccer boxes this week, and he had Robbie Keane and Berbatov off, two separate ones, and in both of them he said about how great it must be for an attacker playing at Spurs because they were such an attacking team. But they said he had so much sympathy for defenders and goalkeeper at Spurs because they always felt with their expansive style of play. Did you ever feel that at White Hart Lane? Like, God, can we just park the bus for a couple of games here?
Well, I mean, when Harry was the head coach, with Andre had a pretty defensive approach to him, to be honest with you, and maybe that's why it didn't work out fully with the Tottenham fans in him. But with Harry, there were some games where we would go out with a back four and Scotty Parker and me, and then the rest of the players. Listen, this is a disservice. I'm not saying this. This is I'm embellishing here, but it was almost as if every other player didn't have a position. Because you would go out and you'd have Luka Modric always, you'd have Gareth Bale, you would have Rafael van der Vaart, you would have Emmanuel Adebayor. Those are pretty much consistent in that first year. But then you had the likes of your Peter Crouches and Nico Cranchiars. You had Aaron Lennon. You had you see Tommy Carroll was young, and Tom Huddleston. You would have had Kyle Walker would have been going forward. Benoit Asakato would be going forward. At times it would be, Scotty like looking around trying to drag anyone back on the left, anyone back on the right. Me talking, it would be, a mix of if Ledley King was fit or Michael Dawson or Yunus Kabul, and we would just be trying to drag anybody back to defend. But what we were really strong that season, and we would, some of the games you'd be up 3-0 cruising, and then as a goalkeeper you would have to face 3 breakaways just for nothing. It's just because we're still attacking. But I have to tell you, it was fun to play in. It really was, and we had some outstanding players. We really did. And I mean there was even a game when we were walking out there, and Raf van der Vaart was telling us, he's like, I'm not playing on the right today. I'm playing up front. And Harry wanted him to play on the right and come in on his left foot. He goes, well, I'll play on my left foot, but I'm not defending. And he was like, I'm attacking. And so Kyle Walker was one of the fastest players in the league. He was like, oh, great. But he could deal with it as well, but it was, we had some games like that without a doubt, but we had some talented boys that year.
Look, and Leanne has said there about the point of Mauricio and the mentally exhausting training sessions. She's asked if it was just the decisions in the games, or if it was the intensity that he was putting you through, or where did that mental fatigue come from, or challenges?
On the training, definitely came from the intensity of the training sessions and the physicality of it. There were, very, very, very few sessions, except for on the Thursday, 2 days before a game when it was strictly a recovery session. Very few training sessions that were what you would consider as a player pretty easy. Just none. Just kept your fitness levels up. Can we make it? Can we make it better? Can we make it better? Can we make it better? And then when players were coming in, especially at first when he took over and was like, they come to me, some of the older players, Brad, you got to go talk to him. This is crazy, and I was doing my pro license with one of the assistant coaches at the time, so it was an interesting thing. It's like, no, come on, let's back him. He knows what he's doing, and and we got into it. What he ended up doing was the players that would complain, he got out, and some really good players, but he had to, because he really needed to push the boat, and he did, and it's just hard. I mean, Jurgen Klopp's, I still have some friends at Liverpool, and he's the same. He would call players in at first, and and they said he would ask. He asked one in particular that I know. He asked if he thought he was fit, and the player said yes. He goes, well, I think you're about 50% fit for me and my system, and he couldn't believe it. But now that player plays regularly and is phenomenal. So you can get there. It's just you risk some injury, I'm sure, because not everyone's, because you also go into tackles as you're playing, and quick turns and things of that nature. But that's what it is. It was more the intensity on a daily basis. But you have to be fit at the top of the tree now to win trophies in Europe in today's football.
When you're going through, that's really interesting, the pro license and experience at the same time. So I imagine when you're starting to get templates of periodization charts and you're starting to, this is how this should work and layer up, people like Klopp and Pochettino, they can't be doing like balancing the typical charts that everyone else is doing. So how does that work?
They're creating new charts. That's what I think. I think Sir Alex was probably the best at it, creating a new chart all the time. That's what they're doing. In my pro license class, I had Ian Wone was in it, who's currently a assistant at Burnley. We had Scott Parker and myself, who were two current players, and we had Phil Neville, who had just recently retired. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, who was coaching but kind of recently retired as a player, and it was interesting on that course to have our perspectives. And I know every pro license course has a few of the current players or just recently retired players. And periodization came up with all the charts, and you could openly say, well, that's being exploded right now. And and a lot of people, skeptics, yeah, but it won't work, and you'll be too tired, and you're killing the players, and the quality will go down, and because there's a lot of pushback, especially in the Dutch league. And Dutch coaches, they say, no, this is crazy. This is way too hard, and that's fine, and that's their view. And there's some wonderful Ajax teams, and if they had a little bit more money, they'd probably be winning more things. And they produce some incredible footballers. So it's just a different philosophy. But I think the Germans and the English, the fitness levels are high, really high.
Go then to, did you try to bring that to the MLS? Because, and I might be wrong, outside looking in, it looks like the tempo of the game, like if Atlanta, even Bob Bradley, LAFC, like it's getting there. Were there problems culturally, or did you not try to bring that brand of environment over?
No, I did, and we had and I have to go back even with the 19s. We had a great a group of coaches, in my opinion. When Tab was the 20s, I was the 19s. Omid Namazi was the 17s. John Hackworth was 17s. Sean Sakara 16s. Dave Vandenberg the 15s. Tab really he went over to Europe a bit, and Tab was very very good on going and learning around the world, and he took on board like a lot of the physicalities. Now he wanted a lot of football to be played as well, and Tab was one of the very, very best US has produced with regards to being a skillful player. But we brought some of that into the national team programming at the time, and high pressing game. I think at New England, what ended up happening, the first 6 months we were very good. It was new, the players bought into it. And then that's exactly where, like when Mauricio ran into at Tottenham, and at that stage I needed to be backed. And when certain, and not just players, but when certain staff members and certain players needed to be out of the club, I was told no. And then you're dead, because I'm asking these players every single day to work harder than they've ever worked in their life. With the maybe the exception of Christian Nemeth was at Liverpool. He was young, but he was at Liverpool when Benitez was there. So he would have, I think, I don't know how much he trained with the first team and stuff, but he would have seen it at least. But most everyone else, my first season there, they wouldn't have seen work like this and to sustain it. But then not everyone can do it. And when I asked for certain people to be removed from the club, no. And then when it was staff members that were taking meetings and phone calls from not staff that I brought in, but just auxiliary staff, that players could go and say, well, I don't want to wear this t-shirt to dinner, I'm sick of wearing it. And they said, oh, I'll go have a word with Brad, instead of saying, just deal with it, it's a t-shirt. These are the rules now. Instead of having that, and it just all broke down. And then when you get 2, 3, or 4 players upset, and you don't get rid of them, then that turns into 8 or 9, and you're still asking them to work really hard, and it's tough. Then it just all crumbles down. You have to, when you have that peak and you figure out which players can work for you, then you have to get the ones that are going to grumble out of the changing room. And that's really looking back on it, what happened. I was not given the opportunity to get the players out quick enough, and it was only a couple. It wasn't a lot, and that's where really it started going. And then because little things like do we have to wear a tracksuit on an airplane? Is it that big of a deal? And you could argue, is it that big of a deal not to? But that's how I learned. Sure. That's really what it boils down to. And it's live and learn.
Brilliant. Let's go to the College Fit Finder who helped us set this up, and you've got involved with them. And I went through the system the other day. It's amazing the depth and detail that. I went through from coming over internationally to college over here and looking at books and trying to guess basically where the best place to go. With a system like College Fit Finder and being around, you've obviously had to choose clubs and choose environments to go into. How would you have used College Fit Finder if you were a player now?
Well, seeing how I was only recruited by two teams, 2 universities. It was only Cleveland State and UCLA. Yeah, I would have used it. A lot more. My pathway into the professional game was so lucky. Like, people don't realize how lucky it was. And not until I was recruited by UCLA did people even know what my name was. The only reason Cleveland State knew me is because one of my old coaches, Tom Turner at the time, was the one who took over as a head coach, so he knew me, and that was kind of it. So the other thing on top of that is there's a lot of problems between the professional game and NCAA restrictions, with regards to the young players coming up, and I take that on board. But we in the United States, also of any country in the entire world, have the best fallback policy for those players that don't make it professionally, and that's college scholarship. So you have to take the good with the bad, and that's where we as coaches, or the coaches out there now, they have to do a better job in the professional game of getting to the players early enough so they know which ones that they're going to pay for their college education for, and then let the other ones go to college. They can get their college paid for, and if they develop later, then great. And that's where College Fit Finder can come into play. But there was nothing like this when I was growing up. Like, everything was done via luck. With regards to me for soccer, they had far better avenues in basketball, far easier avenues in tennis and ice hockey. Those are the other sports that I played and was getting recruited in. Soccer was the one that I loved, but I every time I made the regional team, I couldn't, or I'd go to the States, make states go to regionals. I couldn't go to the regional. I had to make a choice between basketball camp and that. So people never really knew who I was with regards to soccer. So College Fit Finder, something like this could have helped dramatically.
I just saw UCLA and thought 300 schools were probably sending you letters every single day back then. No, wow.
No, Soccer America wrote an article saying that I was the second most recruited goalkeeper, the U.S. I think Ray Harrington was number 1 at the time, I think, or Dudek. I forget who, but it was no, it's Jersey Dude. I can't remember the name. Anyway, something like that. But anyways, I got a call late by Maryland. This is after I had signed my letter of intent to go to UCLA, but it was only after they had heard Ziggy took me out for a recruiting trip. And that, in Indiana, after I had signed for UCLA, Jerry Yeagley asked why I didn't contact him at Indiana. I didn't know I was supposed to do the contacting. And they already had Jurgen Sommer there, who was 2 years older, and he was the number one. So but when we first started it, I didn't even know Jurgen was there. I didn't even know how good Jurgen was. It just wasn't easy information to gather back then.
Last couple for you here. The goalkeeper coaching. We've had a few goalkeeper coaches during the lockdown come on, talk about environments. And one thing that's again fascinated me has been how important is it I mean, it's so difficult being a number 2 and a number 3, but how important is it that there's chemistry in that goalkeeper union in the club?
Really important, because you're together so much. It's tough. It's one of the hardest things to do. You want a number 2 who's going to support the number 1, but you want a number 2 who's going to battle and be good enough to be the number 1. You want a number 3 who's either older and experienced, so they're okay with being the number 3, or you want the number 3 to be a young up and coming goalkeeper, but then that young and up and coming goalkeeper needs to get games somewhere. So it's a tough one. So really, if you're at a top pro club and you have the resources to do it, you would have an out and out number 1, a number 2 that wants to be the number 1, that's angry when he doesn't play, but he's a good team guy. You want an outstanding young goalkeeper that you put out on loan, and then you want a 35 to 40-year-old number 3 that if he gets called on to play, great, but he's really fit and robust and be able to train all the time and do all the shooting with the players and things of that nature. If you have the resources to do that, that's probably your best combination of everything. Where you get into the tricky ones is when, like at Man City years ago, and you have both Joe Hart and Kasper Schmeichel coming through at the same time, and you have to make a choice, and you don't really want to make a choice because you want both of them on your books, because they're both outstanding at the time, and then you have to make your choice. That's a tough one. You have 2 really good up and coming promising young goalkeepers, but only one's going to be able to play. And that's when it comes tough. And it's probably even tougher if you had 2 28 to 30-year-olds that were both internationals at the same club. It's very, very difficult to have both of them. And I don't mean happy. You're not there to make friends with everyone, but you also don't want the petulance to take over.
Brilliant. What advice would you have for young coaches and young coaches who are goalkeepers and want to specialize working at the college or pro levels? What advice would you have for them?
For the goalkeeping coaches?
Goalkeeping coaches first, yeah.
My first day on the job, I would go to the goalkeepers that you have, and I would say, I'm here to be friends with you, or friendly with you, but I'm not your friend. If you have something that you need to tell me, I will be a sounding board for you. But please know that anything you tell me, I have the ability to go back and tell the head coach, because you can't be stabbing the head coach in the back. You can't be keeping certain things from the head coach and the rest of the coaching staff if it's not right. You can pick and choose the odd item to keep to yourself if you need, but you can't be the guy that when the goalkeeper makes a mistake, you're putting the arm around him and said, yeah, that wasn't your mistake, that was the defender's. Yeah, I don't know why the head coach isn't playing you. Yeah, you can't be that guy. You're part of the staff. You're not part of the just the goalkeeping community. And I think on the first day, if you were to say that and set the groundwork, then you can have a really good working relationship with all your goalkeepers. But they need to know what the rules are and what the outlines are for you with regards to your relationship with the staff. If you do it the other way and you become their friend, that moment that the first goalkeeper is ever dropped, the moment when something is blamed on him or her, then that's your relationship done. And then you can't have a working environment anymore. It's too difficult. That would be my advice.
Brilliant. Head coach advice.
Head coach's advice is make sure you can get as many of your own staff members onto your staff as possible. Again, I think it's very important that you can have arguments and disagreement with your staff, but once you walk out of the room, whatever the head coach's idea is, you have to have a staff alongside of you that will not let people inside your circle of your circle of trust, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase. And the other thing with that is and this is I'm taking from personal experience, worry about more what's above you than below you. Really do your homework on what's above you with regards to your leadership roles, that who's running the club and who's going to allow you to make certain decisions and things of that nature. I think most head coaches out there, especially when you get to the professional level and college level, you can put on training sessions. Training sessions are the easiest thing that you can do. It's the fun part. You're out on the field and the players are enjoying themselves, and that's the easy part. It's what happens off the field and who's undercutting you from above you. And just do your homework on that.
Last two quick ones. Best player played with?
Oh, a lot. Maybe Georgie Haji.
Oh wow, there's a name.
He's. I mean, I played with a lot of greats. He
was tiny, wasn't he, Brad? He was very small.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he's not far off Maradona class. I mean it. He was. I mean, Luka Modric was good. Gareth Bale was incredible. And Michael Owens and Robbie Fowler's and he was maybe Giga, yeah.
And then against, who give you nightmares?
There's a few. It's tough to put one down. I mean, Alan Shearer was outstanding. Dennis Bergkamp was outstanding. Zola was outstanding. Ronaldo was outstanding. I mean, Henri was outstanding. I mean, maybe Bergkamp. He was very, very good. But then the United players. I mean, even your Paul Scholes of this world used to give me fits. Like it, I had a decent. I was saying that I had a decent record against Man United. So not. Yeah, there were some good. I mean, Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank was good as well. I mean, I'd have to go through. Didier Drogba was good too. There were. I mean, Robin and Van Nistelrooy was good. There's a lot. Yeah. Too many. I forget about them now because I can sleep better.
Brad, thank you so much. I really, really, really appreciate your time. Appreciate you coming on. This has been fantastic, and thanks so much.
You got it. Thank you very much.
All the best.
Enjoy
Thanks, Brad.
Everyone. Bye. Bye.